Canada's vast border with the world's richest superpower should be its greatest asset. But here's what really matters. Over 75% of everything Canada exports is shipped straight to the United States, a one-way dependency that leaves Canada's $2 trillion economy utterly exposed. What if the very geography Canadians hail as leverage is actually a trap, one that is almost impossible to escape? The truth behind this paradox is more unsettling than you have ever heard. It begins with a single, inescapable number. Every hour, more than 60 million United States dollars worth of Canadian goods cross the border heading south. That is not a rounding error. It is the lifeblood of a nation's economy. The relationship is so lopsided that 75% of everything Canada sells abroad goes to just one customer, the United States. For the United States, Canadian trade barely registers as a footnote, about 15% of their total. But for Canada, this is an all-in bet. The numbers are staggering. In 2024, over 76% of Canadian goods exports landed in American ports and warehouses, and the total climbs even higher when services are counted. This is not just about manufactured goods or oil. Canada's farms, forests, and mines all feed the American machine. Nearly a third of the entire Canadian economy, about $600 billion a year, depends on American buyers. The United States, meanwhile, sits atop an economy 10 times larger, with a gross domestic product of $25 trillion. If the United States ever stops buying, Canada does not just take a hit. It faces an economic gut punch worse than the Great Depression. The real danger lies in how this dependency shapes power. Canada's much-praised geographic position, vast resources, open border, easy access, has not created leverage. It has built a one-way street. Imagine a country where 75% of exports flow in a single direction with no viable backup plan. That is not just risky. It is a structural vulnerability. If even half of those exports vanished overnight, the shock would erase more than 20% of Canada's gross domestic product in a single blow. No stimulus package could cushion that fall. So why does a nation with so many apparent advantages find itself trapped? The answer is not just in the numbers. It is in the design of the economy itself. A system built to serve one customer with every road, rail line, and pipeline pointing south. The paradox is clear. What looks like power on a map can, in reality, be a cage built from statistics, contracts, and a single inescapable number. Stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific, Canada looks vast and unconstrained on a map. But here is the reverse truth. Almost all of its 39 million people are pressed up close to a single line, the U.S. border. Nearly 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of that invisible divide. It is not a matter of preference or national character. It is survival. The Canadian Shield, a sweep of ancient rock and stunted forest, covers half the country. North of the border towns and cities, temperatures drop, farmland vanishes, and the land turns to swamp, tundra, and endless trees. Only 7 or 8% of Canadian territory is good for crops or cities. The rest is beautiful, but harsh and empty. A mayor from Windsor put it bluntly, "If Detroit catches a cold, we sneeze." Our main street faces south, not north. In border towns, the rhythm of life follows the fortunes of American neighbors. The factories, schools, and shops all exist because of proximity to the U.S. It is not just Windsor. Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, all the country's big cities, sit in a narrow southern strip crammed between the border and the Shield. The entire Canadian economy is pulled toward the U.S. by geography as much as by policy. Unlike Europe, where countries have neighbors on every side, Canada has just one. Berlin sits within a day's drive of 9 other capitals. Toronto, by contrast, has only one real international highway, and it heads straight to Buffalo. There is no other major market within reasonable reach. The result is a nation whose people, cities, and industries all face south, not by choice, but by necessity. This is the reality that shapes every decision in Canada's economic life. A country built for connection, but with only one door open to the world. Steel rails, asphalt, and pipelines all point in one direction, south. For more than 150 years, Canada's transportation network has been built to serve a single goal: connect Canadian resources, factories, and ports to the American market. The logic is hardwired into the ground itself. Take a shipping container in Vancouver. Sending it to Seattle, just 230 kilometers away, costs $800 and takes less than a day by rail. That same container bound for Toronto faces a journey nearly 20 times longer, over 4,400 kilometers, and a bill that easily tops $3,000. The trip drags on for 5 or 6 days, crossing mountains, prairies, and the ancient rock of the Canadian Shield. The numbers do not lie. It is 3 to 5 times cheaper to send goods from Vancouver to Seattle than to Toronto, even though Toronto is Canada's largest city. Trucks tell the same story. A full load to Seattle can be delivered in hours, for less than 1/5 the price of sending it east. Why? Because the infrastructure was never designed to bind Canada together. Instead, every major rail line and highway was laid down to funnel raw materials and finished products straight to the U.S. border. East-west routes are longer, slower, and far more expensive to maintain, especially where the terrain turns to granite and muskeg. But here is what really matters. Rewiring this system is not as simple as laying new track. Building a true east-west grid across the Shield and the Rockies would cost hundreds of billions of dollars and take decades. Until then, the path of least resistance and lowest cost runs south. The physical map of Canada does not just suggest a dependency, it enforces it, one freight bill at a time. A supply chain executive in Ontario once described the job as living on a stopwatch. In Canada's auto sector, that is not an exaggeration. The reality is relentless. A single car part might cross the border 6 or 7 times before it finds a home in a finished vehicle. Engine blocks cast in Ohio, machined in Alliston, Ontario, then shipped back to Michigan for assembly, a dance of steel and logistics that never pauses. Every hour, thousands of trucks and rail cars move between Windsor and Detroit, Sarnia and Port Huron, Toronto and Buffalo, all to keep just-in-time assembly lines humming. There is no slack in the system. Border delays of even a few hours can idle entire factories, costing millions in lost production. Over 85% of Canadian-made vehicles are exported straight to the United States. These are not independent products. They are the result of a cross-border choreography, where Canadian plants are essentially extensions of Detroit's industrial base. The same pattern holds in aerospace. Bombardier jets rely on U.S. engines and avionics, while American giants like Boeing depend on Canadian-made components. Each side is plugged into the other, but the power runs one way. Canada's factories exist because the American market demands it. If that demand dries up, the assembly lines stop overnight. This is not partnership. It is dependence, measured in border crossings and billable hours. The entire manufacturing sector operates as a subsystem of the U.S. industrial machine. No amount of policy or patriotism can unwind a supply chain built to cross the border 6 or 7 times before breakfast. The next time a new car rolls off an Ontario line, remember, it is not just made in Canada. It is made in America, by way of Canada, over and over again. An energy economist in Calgary once described Canada's oil industry as the world's most profitable hostage situation. Here's why. Nearly 98% of Canadian oil exports go to a single customer, the United States. But this isn't just about volume, it's about power. Most of Canada's oil is heavy crude, thick and sour, needing specialized refineries. And almost all of those refineries sit south of the border. Canada can pump, drill, and extract all it wants, but when it comes time to sell, there is only one market with the right equipment and the right appetite. Pipeline politics have only tightened the noose. The Keystone XL project, which would have carried Alberta crude deeper into the United States, was scrapped after years of legal and political battles. Energy East, meant to reach Atlantic ports and offer a lifeline to European markets, died under the weight of cost and controversy. Even the Trans Mountain expansion, Canada's last hope for Pacific access, has ballooned to more than $34 billion and faces endless delays. With no major pipelines reaching the coasts, Canada's oil is landlocked, forced to flow south through aging infrastructure. The result? Canada sells its oil at a steep discount, often $15 to $20 less per barrel than global prices. The United States sets the terms, and Canada takes what it can get. For every barrel shipped, the value is shaved down by a market that knows Canada has nowhere else to turn. In the end, the energy boom isn't a symbol of independence. It is a reminder that geography can turn a nation's greatest asset into its deepest vulnerability. A former Bank of Canada official once summed it up with a single chilling phrase: "We have 72 hours of real independence." In the world of monetary policy, that is not poetic license. It is the harsh limit. When the U.S. Federal Reserve moves interest rates, the clock starts ticking in Ottawa. Capital reacts instantly, but the real test comes over the next 3 days. If Canadian rates stray too far from Washington's, global investors pull billions out of Canadian bonds and stocks, pushing the loonie into free fall. The mechanics are unforgiving. Hedge funds and pension giants can move money across borders in seconds, exploiting even the smallest rate gap. Within 72 hours, if the Bank of Canada has not brought its policy back in line, the exodus becomes a stampede. In 2017, rumors of NAFTA's collapse sent the Canadian dollar tumbling nearly 7% in a matter of days before a single policy changed. The threat is not theoretical. It is a daily reality for policymakers who know that a bold, independent move on rates could trigger a market revolt almost overnight. The result? Canadian interest rates must shadow the Fed, not because of economic theory, but because the alternative is financial chaos. In this system, sovereignty is measured in hours, and when the world's biggest economy sneezes, Canada's currency gets pneumonia fast. A Toronto software engineer sits at her kitchen table, staring at a job offer from San Jose. The numbers are impossible to ignore. Her salary would double overnight, plus a signing bonus bigger than her last year's raise. She is not alone. Each year, between 50,000 and 70,000 skilled Canadians, engineers, doctors, scientists, make the same calculation and head south. For many, the decision is not about chasing sunshine or adventure. It is arithmetic. A Canadian nurse earning $80,000 can make $160,000 across the border. A data scientist who makes $100,000 at home is offered $200,000 in Seattle or Chicago. Even family doctors, well paid by Canadian standards, see their incomes climb by 60% or more in the U.S., with lighter tax bills to match. This is not a trickle. It is a steady outflow. Canada invests tens of thousands of dollars training every professional, but the tax returns and economic benefits end up in American coffers. The wage gap acts like a magnet, pulling talent south and forcing Canadian companies to compete with Silicon Valley pay scales just to keep the lights on. There is no language barrier, no visa wall, just an open highway lined with recruiters. The result? Canada becomes an incubator for American prosperity, losing not just workers, but the future innovations, businesses, and tax dollars they would have built at home. For decades, Canadian politicians have promised a pivot to Asia, a bold new era of trade that would finally break the United States' grip. The reality is far less inspiring. Every major diversification push, from Team Canada missions in the 1990s to the Asia-Pacific Gateway in the 2000s, has run aground on the same stubborn facts. Start with the calendar. Shipping goods from Vancouver to Shanghai or Tokyo takes 2 to 3 weeks. Trucking those same goods to Seattle or Los Angeles takes 2 or 3 days. For time-sensitive cargo, fresh food, auto parts, pharmaceuticals, the difference is not just inconvenient. It is a deal breaker. Numbers tell the story. In 1988, about 70% of Canadian exports went to the United States. In 2024, after decades of trade missions and new agreements, that share sits at 76%. China and Southeast Asia already have deep supply chains with closer, cheaper partners. Canadian products, especially those that cannot sit on a container ship for weeks, simply cannot compete on speed or price. Even when the United States imposed tariffs in 2025, Canada's export share to Asia barely budged and quickly snapped back as soon as tensions eased. The so-called Asia pivot is a political slogan, not a strategy. Geography, shipping times, and entrenched supply chains mean Canada's economy is still chained to the United States market. Any talk of escape is just that, talk. Negotiating with a superpower isn't a contest of equals. In 2018, as the United States threatened to tear up the North American Free Trade Agreement, Canadian officials found themselves locked in marathon sessions, fighting to keep access to their only real market. The United States team arrived with a list of demands and a simple threat: accept the new rules or face tariffs that could gut the automotive sector overnight. Canadian negotiators had red lines, but every line was drawn with American leverage in mind: auto jobs, dairy protections, digital trade. The real power play came with the so-called Sunset Clause. Under the new United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the deal must be reviewed every 6 years and can expire after 16 years. That means Canada's economic future is never more than a few years away from being put back on the table. The message was clear: the United States can keep Canada in a state of permanent uncertainty, forcing concessions by threatening to close the gate. When the United States imposed steel and aluminum tariffs in 2018, Canada scrambled to respond, but its retaliatory measures barely registered in Washington. The United States knows that for every dollar at stake, Canada has 5. That's not a partnership, it's a high-wire act, with one side holding the safety net and the other hoping not to fall. Today, over 75% of Canadian exports still flow south, and every policy debate, from pipelines to interest rates, circles back to the United States border. For Canadians, economic sovereignty is not just a negotiation, it is a geographic impossibility. But here is what really matters. As the world shifts and the United States flexes, Canada's future remains inextricably tied to its neighbors' fortunes. In the North American game, geography does not just deal the hand, it decides who wins.